Hey everyone, I'm Patrick Jones, and welcome to episode 75 of That Gives Me Anxiety. Just getting out of the shower here, that's why I look wet if you're watching on YouTube. Just worked out. And of course, right? I had to work that right into the intro. That's right, I worked out. And I got a podcast so I could tell people about it. Had a big task weekend. A lot of tasks. Done. Cross it off the list. Oh, is there a better feeling than crossing something off your to-do list? Like literally, I write things down and have Jamie write things down that she needs me to do. Like I have like an intake form. It just helps me prioritize and look at what I have to do and then crossing it off. Crossing something off the list is like what an Oreo used to be, right? Just all goodness. No regret. No tummy jiggle. Ugh. That's a gross thought. Planted some more bushes. Put some more dimmers in the house. Mowed the lawn. Did some weeding. Trimmed some trees. I mean, I crushed it. I nailed it. If I just started listening, it would be too boring. I had to stop myself there, right? Because I wanted to brag about it a little bit. But you get the point. You see the excellence. Well, anyway, I've got a great episode lined up for you today. Today is part one of a two-part series on sharks. I've wanted to do this for a long time. It's such a common fear, so of course I wanted to cover it. I mean, not to mention sharks are fucking awesome. They're objectively cool. There's no debate there. And to help me out with the series, I have my friend who's an extremely talented improviser, Andy Adkins, here at Theater 99. And from Florida International University, I have Yannis, who's a shark expert, who is nice enough to grant me some of his time to talk about sharks and fear related to them and what might help people become less afraid of sharks. So yeah, I mean, we got some great facts on sharks, some ways to help you with your fear. It's going to be a good series. I'm feeling it. Well, before we get to the interviews, I just want to remind you, if you're liking the show, please remember to rate and review it. Throw 5 stars, and what a podcast, right? That's a quote that you would put as a review, in case you were struggling to come up with one. You can check the show out on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. YouTube is where you can look at my wet hair and know that the second I saw myself on my computer screen as I'm recording this, that I was going to mention that I had just worked out. Because if you work out and don't tell anyone, did you even work out? Also, a reminder of my partnership with Pure Spectrum CBD, who have the promo code AnxietyPod, no spaces, AnxietyPod, P-O-D, where you can get a 15% discount on gummies or moisturizer salves, it's kind of like icy hot without the icy or the hot. It just, for me, melts the pain away because I get a lot of pain because I worked out. No, from old man hockey. I need a lot of help, and Pure Spectrum has been great. And if you're liking the show and you want to place a donation or a tip, you can do that through the Buy Me a Coffee link, which is in the description. So yeah, thank you so much for listening. Let's talk about sharks. Oh man, I almost jumped into a whole Jaws routine there. Podcast goes into the... No, I'm going to stop. I still did it anyway. Well, as always, thank you so much for listening and enjoy. Joining me now on the podcast to talk about anxiety related to sharks, I have my friend Andy Adkins, who's a improviser and, well, an extremely talented one at that. Very funny. So, Andy, thank you so much for coming on.
Well, thank you, Pat. Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell me a little bit about your anxiety related to sharks. Is that something that you think about every time that you go to the beach?
A little bit. I guess I'll give you a little background. I grew up my whole life here in Charleston, South Carolina, which is right here along the ocean, which, as you know, is the land of sharks.
Yeah.
And the water here is kind of murky. If you're at the beach, once you're past waist deep waters, you can't really see too well what's in there. So
Mhm.
there's, kind of just a vague sense of what's around you. You can't see anything until it's up really close. So there's an element of mystery there that I've always found kind of frightening.
It is frightening. I've been in the water at Sullivan's Island. For people who don't know, that's one of the beaches here. And I want to say within 10 feet of me, just like more than one dolphin just like surfaced. And it's
Yeah.
just like I had no idea that they were that close to me. And they're not small.
Yeah, they're big, and I mean they're physically intimidating if you're not used to being around one, or if one surprises you. And yeah, if I see them, then I assume that they're chasing fish, which could mean that there are sharks also chasing those fish.
Absolutely.
When I was growing up, my parents for a short while got into surf fishing, which is where you just go to the beach and cast a rod like straight into the waves.
Mm-hmm.
And the most common thing that they would catch when surf fishing would be little sharks.
Oh, wow.
They're just kind of like all over the place. And most of them would be under 2 feet in length, but they're very common. And I think there's a lot more out there than we sometimes realize.
Which is, it's even if it's like 2 feet, I don't want to lose a toe. I don't want to get
Right.
bit in any way, shape, or right. I don't want to get bit by a mosquito. Forget about like something that's designed to like eat pieces of our bodies.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'll avoid sticking my hand in like a shoe that's been out on the porch because I don't want to get bit by a spider. So
I do the
um
same thing. I have like my like yard work sneakers that I just like they live outside, and like every time I go to use them, I like pat them to like
yeah, to
or like
scare
turn
off
them
the
upside
critters.
down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's another thing though that are you familiar with Shark Week?
Oh yeah, on the Discovery
Yeah.
Channel. Oh yeah.
Yeah, so I grew up watching Shark Week, and one thing that they always go back to is the mighty bull shark. I don't know, are you
Mm.
familiar with the bull shark?
Familiar in the sense that I've heard that animal's name before. So like anything else that you're about to say is new.
Well, as I understand it, and I'm no expert, but the bull shark is the most aggressive of all the sharks,
Mm.
and it's also able to live in fresh water. So they can
Oh.
swim way up rivers very far where you wouldn't expect there to be sharks, but there could be the most aggressive shark right in there. And so in the Charleston area where we also have alligators, when you
Mm.
get into these creeks, that's what I've dubbed the alligator shark convergence zone, where it's possible that you could see an alligator and a shark in the same creek, which is pretty terrifying.
It, yeah, it sure is. You know what, that rings a bell, in that I've heard of a shark being like way up the Mississippi River, possibly a bull shark that like I'm
Like
gonna say like
Illinois or
Iowa
something.
or what'd you
Yeah,
say?
yeah. Illinois, maybe? I
Yeah,
feel like I've heard this story. Yeah.
that's so far up, which is remarkable and terrifying. Just lends to sort of what we're talking about here. You just have to make your peace with we're going to be around sharks.
Yeah. It's like, having said all this, all the time, people are recreating in the waters every
Mm-hmm.
day.
Mm-hmm.
And, you rarely hear of anything ever happening. So, I guess that they're not very interested in us, because
Yeah,
they're definitely there.
absolutely. Yeah, moving to South Carolina, it's been interesting hearing people who are like stand-up paddleboarders or kayakers, and like they all have a story of either a giant alligator or a giant shark like swimming under their boat, and nothing happened, right? I mean, just that is
Yeah, just
remarkable enough of a story, right? Just to be around those giant creatures.
yeah. I guess like since this podcast was on my radar, I noticed a news story within the past week or so out of Myrtle Beach, South Carolina,
Mm-hmm.
where a 10-foot great white shark got stranded on the beach and died
Wow,
there. But a 10-foot great white,
that's big.
yeah.
So there was one time I'll share a shark story. There was one time that I was in the water. This was in New Jersey, and there was a storm, and so it was like really really choppy. And this is a very dumb idea to like be in the water because of the storm was like all of the water was just like going every which way, and so there was a pier there as well. So meaning like beach, pier, beach. So you wouldn't be able to get out of the water in this stretch because under it is just like a bunch of poles and like the waves crash and like you'd probably like bash your head or something.
Okay, yeah.
So I just share that to be like, I can't get out of the water for this moment as like we're being torn down the beach. So just fighting the waves. And then all of a sudden, I want to say like 25 yards in front of me, a fin comes up and goes down, like coming right for me and my friends. I've never been so terrified in my entire life. None of us were eaten, but just the fact that we could not get out, we were, barely able to keep our heads above water. We had surfboards, but just trying to get our bodies fully on surfboards at that moment was just, I'm getting chills even like remembering it.
Wow, yeah. Do
Yeah.
you have like any estimate on the size of the shark based on the part that you saw?
Well, it's my impulse to like tell a good story and like the amount of years here, right? To want to be like it was probably 50 feet. But if I had to give a fair estimate, I would say 8 to 10 feet.
Good grief. The fact that it's going toward you is
Mhm.
that is just chilling.
Chilling, right? Like it was clearly investigating whatever we were. So thankfully it decided that it we weren't on the menu that night, but yeah, geez.
How far from the shore were you?
Maybe like 20 yards out. It was like one of those points where you just have to swim out past like the breakers a bit just to, especially if you're surfing or
Yeah.
try. It was too choppy to even catch a wave, especially being terrible at surfing.
It seems like a tough swim back with the shark bite, you know?
It sure does. Yeah.
Like,
It has a lot of room to pull you back.
yeah. And it's just gonna attract more sharks, right?
Right, of course. Well, for the listeners, I also interviewed a shark expert, Yannis. So I think it's time to go to the first clip. Can we talk? I know you've got a lot on your plate. You've got work, you've got friends, you've got family, pets, you've got the people that you make small talk with at the coffee shop or gym. You've got that bird that you see when you wake up every morning outside your window that you've projected things onto. Look at that bird. Doesn't even love its family. It's always by itself. You do that. Everyone does that. Point is, you've got a lot on your plate. Well, that's why there's Instacart, to take a little bit off your plate. Using Instacart, you search for all your favorite foods and things that you need from the grocery store, all online, all while you're looking at that bird, wondering why it hasn't called its mom. And they deliver it to you. They go to the store and do the shopping for you. And they can deliver it in as fast as an hour. And you can sign up by clicking the link in the description, wherever you're listening or watching. And that's a great way of supporting the show. So it's a great way of supporting this show. It's a great way to make your life a little bit easier because we all know that you have so much going on, like wondering whether that bird judges you back. Joining me now to talk about sharks, I have Associate Professor at FIU, Yannis Papastamatiou. Yannis, did I get your name correctly? I apologize if I didn't.
No, you got it. That was a good job.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and thank you so much for your time. I'm thrilled to be learning from someone such as yourself here.
No, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So sharks, right? So many people are anxious to enter the water. I think a good place to start might be, first off, your background. I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's let's start with your background before I get into my list of questions.
Yeah, no, I'm born and raised actually London, UK. I'm half British, half Greek. So I also spent several years living in Athens, Greece. And that's actually where my love of the ocean came from, the time I spent in Greece growing up. And then I did an undergraduate at University of Southampton in the UK. I moved to the States for grad school, did my master's at Cal State University Long Beach, my PhD, University of Hawaii. Did a few other positions, was at University of Florida, University of St. Andrews in the UK, and then finally took this position at Florida International University, where I run the Predator Ecology and Conservation Lab.
So not just sharks.
No. I sharks are my specialty, and I'd say the majority of my work, but certainly not all. So I work with other fish, other big fish predators, grouper, some of the big billfishes, tunas, things like that. And then even do some non-fish work. So I've done some work with alligators, for example. So I take sort of a general, I guess I describe myself in a more general sense as a predator ecologist, although a large proportion of that is with sharks.
Nice. I'll share. I moved to Charleston, South Carolina from Brooklyn, New York, and there's an alligator that lives in the pond behind my house. And my perspective on them have changed immensely, right? I was, without any experience of seeing them, I was anxious to be that close to them, but it's not going to bug me. I'm not going to bug it. Like, we're both going to go about our day, right? It's not as scary as people might think.
And I'm certainly not an alligator expert. I've done a little bit here and there, but they are, again, for the most part, you want to not get too close to them, but they really are. To have an interaction with an alligator, you really have to be going into its environment or really kind of trying to mess around with it. So, I mean, I don't go and swim around in ponds, swamps, but other than that, your chance of running into them and having an issue with them is really, as long as you're minding your own business, is very, very small.
Right. Absolutely. So going back to the question that I started before I got ahead of myself here, I'm curious, learning a little bit about how sharks sense their world, like how is their eyesight? And I've also heard about they have some way of perceiving the Earth's magnetic fields.
Yeah, so the eyesight has been a sort of general, has been a question that I think we go back and forth with in terms of describing it. And I'm not a sensory biologist, so it's not my specialty. But there's obviously been a lot of back and forth about whether or not they see color or not, and how good their vision is. And again, not being an expert in the field, I guess I would say overall, they have decent eyesight. By fish standards, that means they're not going to have the resolution we're used to, so they're going to see things more blurry than we would. But again, we have exceptionally good, we humans, exceptionally good visual acuity. So, but it's not bad. But they have an array of other senses, of course, which are very good. They've got a very good sense of smell. They got pretty good sense of hearing. And then, as you mentioned, they have some other sensors that we don't have, including the ability to detect electric fields, such as the bioelectric fields that all living animals will put out. And then we've got good evidence that some of them at least can detect magnetic fields as well, which they could use those for things like navigation.
It's so interesting when you fully recognize and think about how different animals are able to have senses, right? Their world experience is can be so different from ours. It's a nice reminder that our perception of the world is only one way of perceiving it.
Yeah, and we have, I think, many examples where we have been able to reveal how animal perception of the world is different from ours. So, for example, with some insects and some fish too that can see UV light. That means that they view things such as some flower petals. They don't look the same to an insect as they do to ourselves, or just in general. When you look at the visual acuity, what we see as sort of a crisp image is going to be blurry to most animals, and then obviously differences with color, and then all the other senses as well that we don't have. And so that makes some of them actually very difficult to study, because obviously we understand what vision is. We can, have an idea what vision is. But if I ask you, what is it like to perceive a magnetic field? It's very difficult to even know where to start, because, what is that like? We don't even know what sensory organ necessarily detects that. So that makes it a lot more challenging to study. And again, I say that with someone who's dabbled a little bit with sensory biology, but I'm not a sensory biologist.
Right. It's just like when, certain physicists will describe how, we perceive the world to be three-dimensional, and it's possible, it's many more than that, right? If you talk to a string theorist, and there's just no way to put that into our perspective. So it is kind of fun.
Yeah, I mean, I think physicists see the world or the universe in a completely different manner. I mean, everything we're discussing must be pretty sort of seems somewhat irrelevant when you're looking at the universe in that sort of viewpoint.
Yeah, so I'm interested about, two things you hear about sharks that somewhat could potentially be viewed as in conflict with one another. That sharks are curious and quick to bite, and there's old wives' tales about sharks eating everything from license plates to like whatever they can kind of come upon. But then you also hear how sharks are not interested in eating people. So I'm curious, diving into a little bit of their behavior and how they approach feeding themselves, and yeah, just sort of jumping in there.
Yeah, I mean, so the old image of sharks that they were human killing machines, and we can simply say it's just not true. Just looking at the statistics, I mean, you have, I think, an average of 100 shark bites a year on humans worldwide. And if you consider how many humans are going into the water, how many sharks are in the water, and then it really puts into perspective how unlikely it is to get bitten. Right, so the chance is very, very low. When you look at the majority of shark species and actually start considering which species eat animals of our size, then it's a tiny number. So again, everyone likes to say, well, a shark bit me, it was trying to eat me. But again, most predators aren't going to go after prey that are similar size to them. And so then even when you start ruling everyone out and you're left with only a couple of species, maybe white sharks, maybe tigers, even amongst those species, the chance of getting bitten by them is very, very low. So we certainly very rarely appear on the menu, and that just, presents itself in the simple fact that your chance of getting bit in the water is so low.
Yeah. I'm curious, how is that distinction determined, right? Is it they can perceive, are they looking for a certain, let's say, fat content that we don't have? Or is it just simply our size makes us like, sharks just want to eat something easy and they don't want to get into a fight, right? Because fights can be costly.
So, answering that requires an understanding of why bites happen on humans. And we don't, have that. We don't fully understand why sharks will occasionally bite humans. So in some cases, it may be from a large shark investigating a potential prey item. And then, as you said, how do you investigate if you're a large animal? Well, you bite it. You got no arms, right? That's what you would do.
Yeah.
And then perhaps rejecting us for reasons like you mentioned, that the fat content isn't high enough compared to, let's say, seals or animals that they do include in their diet. And this is specific to white sharks. Most sharks aren't eating seals, and so that's one possibility. But obviously, we have plenty of most of the bites on humans are from smaller sharks, and those are certainly sharks that are not including humans in their diet, because we're actually bigger than most of them. So in that sense, it's most likely, it is a mistake of some sort. Murky water, they saw a flash of jewelry, or they saw something they thought perhaps was something smaller, and they bite it. But there's no way that those smaller animals are actually trying to eat something our size. And that's just a few potential reasons. And again, the fact is that in many cases, we don't understand fully why these bites happen. Was it a mistake? Was it a predation attempt? Was it defensive? There could be a variety of reasons.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. Yeah. But also, like, in my mind, I was like, okay, jewelry coming off, going in the ocean.
Yeah, definitely recommendations to just simply reduce the chance. It's never going to make the ocean a safe place completely, but I think you can do things to keep the probability as low as possible.
One of the things that like really jumped out about what Yannis was saying here is just like the different senses that sharks have. Like they can pick up on the electrical fields of living creatures, and they can sense the magnetic poles of the planet, right? It's just, we have no way of comparing what we experience to that, right? Isn't that just like fascinating?
It is fascinating because I just don't have any way to conceptualize what another sense would
Right?
feel like, and the magnetic poles of the Earth, which I guess could be some navigational purpose.
Yeah. I'd imagine, right? If they travel like a far way from where between seasons, how else would they know? They could wind up by Africa instead of intending to come to Florida, right?
Yeah,
Without that. But the electrical field aspect is kind of funny. It's like almost like a spidey sense, like, oh, something's close to me.
well,
Something's
yeah.
getting close.
There'd be no way to trick a shark.
Hmm.
There'd be no fooling it. It senses you like the Force.
Yeah,
Like
that's
Jedi. Like
exactly
when
right.
you're in the water, it's like you're up against a Jedi that can sense your every movement.
Right. And smell you and even like see you, right? It's just built for the water and we are not.
Yeah, absolutely. I have heard this idea too that as like fish stocks get lower, as
Mhm.
the ocean gets overfished and stuff, maybe the hungry sharks will start expanding their diet and trying new things and stuff, and that could be some sort of catalyst for increased shark attacks or something. Do you have
I
any
mean,
thoughts?
logically, that would make sense. It's not something that I was thinking of, but like that would certainly make sense, right? Like if you're in a town that only has a McDonald's, I guess you're gonna have a McDonald's, right? Like that's just sort of what's
Yeah,
around.
yeah, and I mean, it's the chickens coming home to roost because we take their fish and then they come back and they get it from
They get
us.
us. Oh man, it's just like an 80s like revenge movie.
Yeah,
Just
Revenge of the Sharks
yeah. Or just Jaws.
or just Jaws. Yeah,
Yeah. The main question is, right, like we're talking about anxiety related to sharks. And I definitely think about sharks almost every time I go into the water. It just like it's hard not to even it's hard to like ignore the fact that we know we're there, right? That we know they're there. So it's like the question is we hear all these stats about how low the chances are, but like does that actually help? You know what I'm saying? It does, right? I know that. I could regurgitate certain facts and yet I'm still somewhat nervous every time I go in the water. Is that the same for you?
I think so. Yeah, I think that it makes you think about risk analysis and
Hmm.
and how we make decisions because I suppose that getting in the ocean is akin to getting in a car and
Mm.
driving anywhere. You're assuming that amount of risk. But when I get into the ocean, I probably think about sharks more than I think about getting in an accident when I get in a car.
Yeah.
Um,
And I think more about sharks than I do drowning, which is a very real possibility in the ocean as well.
that's that's a really good point because I feel yeah I feel like drowning is way
Way more.
more statistically viable as a threat. Yeah, I could get taken down so fast by a strong current.
Yeah.
Have you ever been stuck in a riptide?
No, have you?
Yeah, one time
Oh,
where
wow.
it kind of like pulls you directly away from the shore.
How
Um,
far did it pull you away?
I don't know. I would imagine maybe 100 yards.
Oh, wow.
Well,
Not an insignificant
yeah.
distance.
It felt like a big distance at the time. I was pretty young, and I was with my brother, and we didn't know what you're supposed to do in that situation.
Which is
Um,
what, like swim like parallel, right?
Parallel to the shore,
Yeah.
because they're narrow currents. They're very
Hmm.
strong, but they're narrow. So once you swim out of it, you can swim back pretty easily. But if you try to fight it, you'll just exhaust yourself. And
Makes sense.
so some
Yeah.
surfers came out and kind of like pulled us away.
Oh,
Uh,
nice.
yeah,
But that's terrifying. Yeah.
but
And and
that is a good point. That yeah, just the ocean itself is way
dangerous.
more dangerous than the things that live in it.
Right.
Uh,
So you're a father, and I'm assuming your kids go into the water. How do you help the? I remember. I mean, most kids are inherently like a little nervous when they're getting in the water. Like, how do you balance introducing them to the ocean while also having an honest discussion about like the dangers? I mean, from drowning and or sharks.
Yeah, I think with my boys where they are right now, they're not really pushing the limits. So like if we go to
Hmm.
the beach, I'm not having to tell them, to come back in. They normally stay in a pretty safe zone where I'm not even really thinking about it
Okay.
too much. I'm mostly just trying to make sure that they're keeping their heads up and everything.
Sunscreen and that battle, yeah.
Yeah, but as they get older, that is going to become more of an issue. And you know, if I worry about it for myself, I'll worry about it way more for them, and that'll be kind of tough to deal with. But you also want to enjoy life, and you don't want to be held back from enjoying things because of irrational fears.
Right. Because the risk of zero doesn't really exist in like almost anything.
Right. Yeah.
There's some risk in everything.
Now, if you don't enjoy being in the ocean, then you should stay out of the ocean for sure. Because
that's true.
Yeah.
There's no gun to your head being like get in the water unless there is. This is the United States.
I've never had like a personal encounter with a shark. I've been along with friends fishing before and have caught a couple, not anything like super big. And I've never really had like a close encounter with one in the water. But I have been stung by a jellyfish a couple times, which was.
Does that hurt as much as people say?
It was like a really aggressive burn, just like a burning on the skin, like you touched a cookie pan or something.
Oh man, which sucks.
Yeah, yeah, which sucks.
But wait,
like the beach is a harsh environment. I feel like the beach is a harsh environment for any type of injury. You're in the sun. There's salt, and it's just like a tough place for any sort of injury or discomfort.
That's true. I do. So to me, when you're saying you got stung by a jellyfish, it's like it stinks if you just feel the pain of it. But to me, it's like worse if you're like, ew, like I see it. Like,
oh yeah,
touching me. Did you see it?
I did not see it, but they were around. There were kind of a lot of them in the water that day. Probably shouldn't have been in the water. It was pretty far reaching too, like most of my leg and then some of my arm. So
oh wow,
long tentacle kind of thing.
I mean, they're no joke. Like, so for the audience, we have a mutual friend, Greg, who was describing to me somewhat recently that he got stung by a jellyfish and like he felt like physically ill, like he was throwing up and having like ongoing issues with it. So yeah, that sounds terrifying to me. Like,
awful.
Yeah, even more reason. I mean, not that I would ever, it's not like a cute animal that you're like, oh, like, let me see, like, if you see a fish, you're like, oh, look at the cute fish. It's like,
right.
Oh, get away.
Yeah, they are monstrous looking.
Yeah.
And good time.
Well, cool. I think it's a good time to go to the second clip with Yannis, where we talk about his guidelines for being safe when it comes to swimming in the ocean as it relates to sharks. Well, what are some of those things?
I mean, they're fairly obvious things. Like, for example, the main thing is, what is the probability that if a shark is in an area, you would see it or somebody would see it from the beach? Because obviously, if a big shark is seen and then people can be alerted, then you can get out. And that simply reduces the chance that you're likely to have a negative encounter. Even though I would say that even if there is a big shark there, the chance of it biting you is still really low. But it's just common sense that if there's a big animal around, you remove yourself.
Right.
So anything that reduces the chance of seeing an animal could increase your risk. We know for some species of sharks, they tend to hunt more dawn or dusk, some species more at night. So those are generally could be periods that might be a little bit riskier, although again, it's hard to measure that in terms of bites on humans. There's things like avoiding swimming next to river mouths, especially during heavy rain. And that's simply because the visibility is very low, and then also you're getting sort of dead animals being washed out into the ocean from let's say rivers and streams and things like that, and it could just increase the chance that you'd have sharks foraging there. I think being in a group is always a good idea. Just again, it means that you're more likely to see an animal if there is one approaching, if there's more of you. And it's a lot of it is kind of common sense, and in the same way that your chance of drowning in the ocean is higher than if you're in a swimming pool. And you would not behave the same way when you go swimming in the ocean as you would in a swimming pool, because it is more risky. So you just got to apply the same sort of level of common sense, and obviously understand the ocean isn't a swimming pool.
Yeah. So where rivers come and meet the ocean, is that a common location? I mean, people here in Charleston talk about how, because we have, multiple rivers emptying into the ocean, that we do have a large shark population. Is it just that like fish will come and reproduce in the rivers, and thus, where prey comes the predator?
Yeah, and I don't think it's, I don't think you have more sharks because of rivers and estuaries emptying in there. And I would say in many cases there isn't direct scientific evidence to back this up. It's more just sort of common sense that you will obviously have dead things being washed out to sea from rivers. I mean, that's what's going to happen.
Right.
And that just means you have additional food source being pumped out into these regions. They also tend to be murky. So again, common sense is just telling us that these are potential areas where you may see an accumulation of some sharks for short periods of time. But again, for many of these points, we don't have strong scientific data to back up. And part of the problem is that when you're trying to analyze shark bite statistics on humans, it's very difficult to do because the sample sizes are so small. That's the problem, is you have very little data. And so that makes interpreting it harder. Now, we're getting better at doing it because we've been collecting shark bite data now over several decades. So we are starting to pull things out of that, but it's still quite limited.
Is that information available somewhere? Could I pour through that a little bit as extra information for this episode?
So the best place to go and look is the International Shark Attack File, which is based at the Florida Museum of Natural History at the University of Florida. So they do an annual report on sort of global shark bite statistics. And so that's an annual report that they do. But there's also peer-reviewed publications that are out there, which includes analysis of shark bite statistics. So there's an increasing number of studies that we're seeing coming out where the shark bite data has actually been analyzed and then peer-reviewed and then published.
Interesting. One of life's mysteries is that birthdays always find me unprepared, catch me unprepared. I don't go on Facebook as much, so I don't notice them as much. But I want to express my love and appreciation for friends and family. That wasn't part of the copy. I'm just saying it. Year after year, month after month. Even when I see it coming, I'm not ready. Am I a jerk? Yes and no. Why do things have to be so black and white for you? But I've got great news, friends. Introducing monthly card subscriptions from the Cardist studio. Join the service that delivers the card and the stamp that you'll need to your door. No more errands. Who wants more errands? I don't know why, but I'm starting to think of errands as a kid's name. Errands, go back to bed. Okay, but here's how it works. You choose your categories, from birthdays and celebrations to love and encouragement, or select their full collections and have those thank you notes and just because cards at the ready. Those ones are always so nice. Like when you get a card for doing something and it's just like a small little heads up or token of appreciation, it genuinely makes you feel really good. And best of all, you would never get caught cardless again. Let me repeat, you'll never get caught cardless again. Try to say that a bunch of times in a row. You'll never get caught cardless again. Monthly card subscriptions from as little as $8 per month for the card and the stamp. Delivered to you. TheCardistStudio.com shop subscriptions. And you can use the promo code AnxietyPod for 15% off your originating order. So a lot of what Yannis is saying there feels, I guess, obvious, right? Like, don't swim alone, don't swim late at night. But I don't know, if you're, some friends and you're doing a bonfire on the beach and you're going to swim at night,
sometimes we get caught up in the moment.
Right. And that's just going to happen. But going back to what you were saying in the beginning of the episode, visibility is a big issue. And that's part of one of his bits of advice, which is don't swim near rivers after it's rained because that churns up a lot more of the sediment. Yeah. And so And sharks are also drawn to the mouths of rivers because dead things wash out of them. So it creates like a snack bar situation for them.
Right. Yeah, and they're just in like eating mode.
And they bump into you, and there you go.
Yeah, and I mean, if I was a shark and I were in eating mode and, I bumped into something, I probably would take a bite. But
Same thing as me at like a wedding where there's just hors d'oeuvres being passed out, right? Like you're not going to say no. You're just going to.
oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't want to be impolite.
Right.
Yeah.
The tray looks heavy. I got to lighten it up.
I'm gonna take a polite, give it a little college try. I think I've kind of come around on the life jackets. Like when I was young, I hated having a life jacket on, but I kind of like the idea of it now, because if a shark bit you or anything like really highly stressful could happen out on the water that could cause you to like faint or something. Like I started thinking about all these secondary things that could happen. Like you get bit by a shark and maybe it's not so bad, but you just get so freaked out that you pass out. I mean, if you're in the water, that could lead to you drowning. And
Absolutely.
I know that's unlikely, but that's just
Yeah.
to think about these things.
Well, the life jacket thing, it's like, why are kids so against life jackets? It's just like now as an adult, maybe it's like I'm more in tune with my own mortality, but it's just nice to lazily float.
Yeah, it's more comfortable. Yeah,
it's like, way more comfortable. Yeah,
it's a definite upgrade. Yeah, I've come around on that. That's just wisdom, baby.
Yeah. Yeah, like I went on a family trip a couple of years ago to Lake Anna in Virginia, and like none of the adults were interested in wearing life vests when we were like boating or swimming, and I was like, no, give me a life jacket because I just want to flop into the water and rest.
Yeah, that's crazy to me. And so I'm not familiar with Lake Anna, did you say? In Virginia? Is this a man-made lake or a natural?
It is. Yeah.
Man-made. So lots of those man-made lakes are really, really deep.
They are.
And that once I get over like really deep water, it's almost similar to a fear of heights. Kicks in a little bit. I don't know if you experienced that at all too, but if I were swimming above 100 feet of water, I'd have like a sense of dread about falling to the bottom.
I share that fear, and also a lot of these man-made lakes kind of displaced human beings, so there's just like a guilt.
They're cursed.
Yeah, it's cursed. And it's like so now we're talking ghosts and
yeah, actually
but yeah, there is like a inherent guilt that there's like some store down there that it's like
nobody's dream.
Yeah. Nope, we got to fill it with 100 feet of water. That's it. Sorry.
Can you imagine? I mean, that's happened to people.
Yeah,
they had their
so
dream.
many times. Yeah, like Lake Marion, right here.
What a thing to have happen to you.
Yeah. Oh, guess you thought you're going to build your whole life around this. Nope.
Yeah,
we're going to fill it so people can.
We've got some other plans.
Yeah. Yeah, Andy. So I really enjoyed episode 1 here. For the listeners, this is going to be a 2-part series. So come back next week and we'll be talking a little bit more about sharks, and we've got more from Yannis.
Pat, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So there you have it, part 1 on sharks. You ever think about someone like Yannis and just think about how much cooler their job is than yours? I mean, his day to day is thinking about sharks, right? Like he's a 4-year-old drawing pictures, and other aquatic predators. Yeah, it's awesome. So thank you so much to Yannis for your time, and thank you to Andy, and definitely come back for part 2 next week where we get some more of the good stuff. Okay, before I get to the weird thing causing me anxiety, just want to remind you of the Buy Me a Coffee link. It's in the description. It's in the description where you can make a small donation, whatever you feel comfortable with. Then my partnership with Pure Spectrum CBD. Don't forget the promo code AnxietyPod, one word, POD for CBD. CBD gummies, tinctures, whatever you're into, they've got it, and I'm a big fan of their stuff. So yeah, check them out. Then if you want to sign up for home delivery for groceries, you can do that through Instacart. That link is also in the description. And by signing up that way, you're telling Instacart that this show sent you, which also helps support the show. And the Cardist studio also offer the promo code AnxietyPod, which gives you 15% off your initial order. So yeah, supporting these sponsors helps support this show and helps me keep making these. Okay, so the weird thing causing me anxiety this week was doing any sort of electrical work can be tricky, right? Even changing switches to dimmers. You just have to figure out the right configuration. But electrical work just makes me feel a little uneasy. Electrical work, right? It's not like I did anything elaborate. You just, twisting wires together. But still, you're touching wires. You still have your parents, being like, don't touch that in the back. Like, did I really flip the right breaker for this? Because, of course, you kill the electricity to the location. But did I do it right? And what part would be electrified, right? If you touch this part of that part. So I've just all day yesterday, and yeah, it was pretty much all day. It took me a long time. Just wondering about, if I touch this, will I get shocked, and will it be a small shock, or will I wind up like Marv from Home Alone 2? Yeah, that's the reason to watch YouTube. To watch my quick Marv impression. Oh! So yeah, maybe that's not a weird thing that gave me anxiety. I just felt soft that I was anxious doing it. I mean, I still did it and didn't complain about it. A real man of the 80s. If you have fear, you don't let anyone know about it. Yeah, trying to change all that. Well, as always, thank you so much for listening. Have a great week, and I'll talk to you on Thursday.